So you were at the
So I
Connecticut
was at the
show.
Ridgefield show. I live like 10 minutes away. And I heard what you guys were saying before. Yeah, they kept it under wraps until like Monday. Um, and, we could talk about the band and I was close, pretty close too. I was like, I don't know, 9 rows back. And yeah, I mean, I was looking around the place. It looks like, yeah, like a mini Capitol or mini Beacon, but
Yeah.
tiny. And before the Cap came, the Cap was like famous back in like, I don't know, 70s, 80s, 90s, and then it fell to pieces. And they redid it and came out in like 2013, 14. But before the Cap, now the Cap draws, Phil and Warren, and they have a great lineup at the Cap. Good jam band scene over there. But Ridgefield used to get all those guys. That was like their Connecticut stop. And I think for Derek, I saw the Derek Trucks band there a couple times. I saw, in the mid 2000s. I saw. So I think they're friends with the owners, and the owners probably gave them a call. And and I said that, and again, I could tell you the story about how I randomly met, got to hang out in the bar with like, it was like 15 people in the band, and Sue and her brother were there, or Sue's brother was there. And I was actually talking to him, not knowing who he was before they showed up. And so she obviously came over right away, and I'm like, holy crap, you're her brother, and it was just really cool. And like, so I think I've heard she's amazing just to hang out with. But I think because her brother was there, she probably let her guard down a little bit. And we just stayed there. We was hanging out with them till like 1 o'clock in the morning. It was so much fun.
That's awesome. I wanted to go back because I wanted to ask you, because we're just connecting now. How long have you been? Obviously, you're already talking about Derek Trucks band and Susan's solo career. But how far do you go back with Susan and Derek, and how did you get connected?
Yeah.
What's your musical background a little bit?
I professed my love to Susan, to my wife. The first time I saw her with the Allman Brothers, maybe 2004.
Were you? Oh, okay. I was going to say, were you there the night Derek and Susan met or something like that?
No,
that's a few years later.
She and actually I wanted to, like it was, I'd seen them in the 90s with Dickie, and but I really kind of, one of my buddies like just was like, you got to see this kid who's playing with them, Derek Truck, and it was amazing, and I just fell for them. I think she played Voodoo Woman and The Weight or something like that. And I was like, who is that? And everyone's like, that's his wife. And I'm like, oh my God, she's amazing. So that was kind of how I started with them. And I just kind of became addicted to them. I just, I went to, living in Connecticut, working in New York, I got a chance to, I would go to the Beacon Run all the time. And then, and then they play these like little shows in their individual bands. I'm also a huge Mule fan, and every Warren Haynes kind of combination, and, the different versions of the Dead and whoever. But it was the Almonds that kind of did it for me. And, Tedeschi Trucks really carried that on. And I've seen them. And I mean, I know there are probably people who have seen them more than me, but I see them a good 2, 3, 4 times a year. Whenever they can. I miss the Garden. I miss the, but I'm always getting tickets and seem like I'm selling them. But I think their music is, I think they're the best band out there by far right now.
I agree.
I said to her, I'm like, and again, she was so personal. It was like talking to just a regular person. I'm like, so you guys, like, I was at, you guys, I thought this was supposed to be your rest period. Like, I think, and I said, you guys, well, I'm sure you two know the story, that the reason why they did the Garden parties was because the band was overworked. And they said, the band is tired. They have young, everyone has young families, and they're tired of being on the road 200 days a year. So they said, I think they said every other year they're going to condense the New York and Boston shows into Garden parties. that's what they're looking at now. So I think that's also why they, have that smaller band. Like maybe the rest of the band doesn't. And I also think you're right; it's a cost thing. But it was funny. So I said to her, so I said, I'm like, you guys are working hard. And she's like, you know what? We were in Japan, had that scheduled. And I think she's like, our management, like threw, I think the Ridgefield show at them, or, and she's like, they threw a few shows at us. So, and I guess they do a lot of private events too. And then the Eagles called, and she's like, of course we were going to do that show. And, her story behind that again was awesome. I'm like, all right, so do you get starstruck? I'm like, I was really surprised. And I'm like, all the Tedeschi Trucks fan pages were kind of rooting for you guys to actually play with them. And they're like, we were thinking that, but I think, because we didn't have any time to plan. But, she's like, so I was like, so you get starstruck? She's like, yeah, we were really that was really special. She's like, but we were kind of jet lagged we were still kind of getting our whereabouts from Japan. These were shows we were not planning, so we didn't get to go home, and then she said, she's like, the three of them came up, Joe Walsh, Don Henley, and Vince Gill, and we're talking to us, and they're like, oh, we love your music. And then she's like, well, Derek's known Joe for a long time, because I've seen pictures of Derek with Joe Walsh when he was a kid, and and she said, and Dwayne taught Joe how to play slide when they were, fucking around back in the 70s, so, Joe always kind of was like, he owes his slide ability to Dwayne. So naturally when Derek comes up, he kind of felt, kind of brought him in. And then she said that she's played with Vince Gill a bunch of times. Back when she was starting out in the Willie Nelson, like they're both really good friends with Willie. So she's like, oh, we've played at different Willie events. And what does he do? He does the Farm Aid. So she's like, so Vince and I have played a bunch of times together. So, but, it's like, we'd never really hung out with Don Henley. So I was like, so I just kind of rolled that into like, all right, so who would you get starstruck by? And she was like, I don't know. She's like, we get to hang out with some pretty cool people. And then we get to hang out with some not so cool people. So then I was like, who are your favorites? Like Willie's been number one, top, nicest person to them. And then I threw in there, I'm like, and BB and Buddy, she's like, I love those guys.